Long before the sun rose above the cobblestone streets, the ovens were already roaring in the old bakery at the heart of town. The windows, frosted with a layer of flour dust, glowed faintly from within, casting golden circles of light onto the quiet boulevard. The scent of dough, browning butter, and sugar melted on the breeze, a siren call for early risers seeking warmth. The shop's weathered wooden sign squeaked gently as a breeze passed, the words "Clover and Crust" still visible despite years of wear. Inside, the kitchen was a symphony of clanging metal trays, soft murmurs of the staff, and the gentle hiss of yeast laden batter coming to life. It felt like magic, like stepping into a world where every sweet creation was a new opportunity to bring comfort and happiness to whoever stepped in from the cold. Tucked in a corner, his apron stained with flour and sugar, worked Ansel, the youngest apprentice the bakery had ever hired. With warm brown eyes and a perpetually furrowed brow, he took his new duties so earnestly that sleep often felt like an afterthought. Only a few weeks earlier, his family had sent him to this bustling town to learn the craft of baking. Ansel had no illusions that it would be easy. Years spent kneading dough until his arms shook, memorizing 1,000 recipes and perfecting his piping technique. But he was eager, excited even, to master each step. Whenever he made a mistake, he'd think of the stories his late grandmother used to tell him about how a small act of feeding someone could lift them in ways nothing else could. He approached his tasks with a reverence that made everyone in the bakery fond of him. They teased him for being too intense, but they admired his determination and the spark in his eyes. It was on one such ordinary morning, while Ansel was shaping brioche rolls, that a newcomer arrived in town. A traveling food critic by the name of Maribel de la Cruz. Few in the region had met her, but her reputation preceded her. Renowned for her discerning palate and evocative writing, Maribel had the power to launch a modest bakery into a tourist haven, or doom an establishment with a single scathing review. Local chatter speculated on which shops she'd visit first and what impressions she might form. Rumors spread that her pen was as swift as it was sharp, but that there was also a softer side to her commentary when she truly savored a dish. Whispers abounded that, despite her worldwide excursions, she remained carefully guarded and rarely spoke of her personal life. Yet, for all the mystery, the town collectively hoped to win her admiration because a glowing review from her could change everything. One crisp afternoon, Maribel strolled along the main street, taking in the architecture of old buildings and peering into display windows with mild curiosity. A sweet aroma drifting from clover and crusts seized her attention. She paused, took a deeper breath, and felt her mouth curve into a hint of a smile. Though she made her living critiquing food, she was not immune to the powerful allure of a well-made pastry. The shop's bell jingled as she pushed open the door. Instantly, the warmth and the smell of freshly baked bread enveloped her. She was greeted by the eager smiles of the bakery's staff, including Ansel, who'd just finished placing an array of cookies in the display case. He looked up, caught her eye, and gave a polite nod, an unspoken welcome shining in his gaze. Maribel's eyes roamed over the rows of pastries, fruit tarts topped with glistening berries, sugar-dusted cookies shaped like flowers, and a special tray of cinnamon rolls swirling with cream cheese frosting. She asked to try the latter, and Ansel hurried to the back to get her a fresh batch just out of the oven. As he carefully transferred a glossy roll onto a plate, the sides of his lips tightened with concentration. This was a moment that might shape the bakery's future reputation, and he wanted it to be perfect. He placed the plate in front of her. Maribel met his gaze with one raised eyebrow as if to say, "Let's see what you've got." She took a bite, closed her eyes, and for a moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. A quick nod of approval followed, and Ansel exhaled in relief. He didn't know she was a famed critic. He only saw a discerning customer who appreciated his efforts. The next day, Maribel returned. This time, she sampled the bakery's signature strawberry cream Danish. As she ate, she scribbled brief notes in the small leather journal she always carried. Ansel, curious, asked in halting words, "Do you, like it?" Maribel glanced up, "It's lovely," she said curtly, her cheeks tinted from the sweet filling. Something about her intrigued him. Perhaps it was the way she weighed each bite carefully, or maybe it was the solitary air she carried, as though she had been wandering for ages and had yet to find a place to rest. Ansel, unsure of how to express his budding admiration, decided to leave a small note with her pastry the next day. When she ordered a slice of coffee cake, he wrapped it carefully, slipping in a short, handwritten message. "Thank you for visiting our bakery. We hope our treats continue to brighten your day." That evening, as Maribel examined the slice of coffee cake in her room, the little note fell onto her lap. Surprised, she lifted it, reading it in the soft glow of a nearby lamp. Its simplicity charmed her. It wasn't an elaborate joke or a brazen attempt at flirtation. Instead, it was gentle, like a single droplet of honey. She found herself smiling, a quiet, private smile, and carefully folded the note back into the bakery box. The following morning, she decided to stop by once again, this time requesting a batch of macaroons. Ansel, busy piping decorative swirls of frosting onto cupcakes, heard her voice and nearly dropped his piping bag. Feeling nervous, though he couldn't quite say why, he quickly composed himself. When he later opened the empty macaroon box, cleaning up for the midday break, he found a note that read, "Your kindness is sweeter than any sugar. Thank you." The handwriting was elegant, and Ansel recognized its energy from the way Maribel held her pen. The exchange of notes became a silent ritual. Each day, Maribel tried something new: a lemon tart, a custard filled donut, or a slice of flourless chocolate cake. Each time, Ansel found a few spare moments to slip in a little greeting. Sometimes a poem he remembered from childhood, sometimes just a simple remark like, "Let sweetness guide us through the bitter days." And each time, Maribel answered with equally thoughtful lines, praising not just the pastries, but subtly complimenting his growing skill. It was an odd dance, neither party openly acknowledging the connection they were forging. Yet they both felt it, an intangible bond that made the bakery's kitchen glow a little brighter, and that made Maribel linger in town longer than she had originally planned. Once, Ansel decided to go out of his comfort zone. He spent half the night perfecting a brand new pastry based on the flavors he suspected were her favorites: a flaky croissant stuffed with hazelnut praline, topped with a delicate drizzle of white chocolate and sprinkled with crushed pistachios. When Maribel came in that morning, he presented it to her with trembling hands. She took a careful bite, savoring each layer. Her abrupt grin said it all. Though no words were exchanged, the next time he checked the counter, he discovered a small piece of parchment tucked beneath some empty takeout boxes. "In your creations, I taste your heart," it read. Ansel pressed the note to his chest, feeling that his world had shifted into sharper focus. He confided in the head baker, Adrian, about the notes, careful not to mention that the mysterious customer was a famous critic, and Adrian teased him for harboring a secret crush. Still, it wasn't all golden dough and sugar crystals. Behind the scenes, there were mounting concerns about supply costs and local competition. Other bakers in the region were experimenting with trendy recipes, piling on extravagant decorations to catch the eye and dime of passersby. Clover and Crust prided itself on tried and true traditions, and sometimes the staff worried their simpler approach might be overshadowed. Ansel, ironically, had long believed that their authenticity was a virtue. You didn't always need complicated icing sculptures when heart and skill were enough to make an unforgettable pastry. Yet whispers in town suggested that if Maribel's review was lackluster, Clover and Crust could be in serious trouble. The unspoken panic weighed on everyone, especially Ansel, who found himself torn between the personal excitement of his budding relationship with this mysterious woman and the professional anxiety that her opinion might decide his entire future. One quiet evening, after the hustle had settled and the bakers were cleaning up, Maribel walked in just before closing time. She looked exhausted, but her eyes carried a flicker of determination. She asked Ansel if she could speak with him privately. They slipped into a corner of the bakery, near a dusty old bookshelf filled with cookbooks and family scrapbooks. For the first time, they spoke openly. Maribel confessed she was in town specifically to write a feature on local bakeries, including Clover and Crusts. She felt she should be transparent about her identity. The revelation slammed into Ansel like an unexpected gust of wind. She was more than just a traveling journalist. She possessed the power to affect the bakery's fate with her pen. He tried to remain calm, but his voice betrayed him. "Why did you keep it a secret?" he asked, wringing his hands. She exhaled, admitting that sometimes anonymity allowed her to savor new places without preconceived expectations or pretense. "I didn't want to be handled with kid gloves," she whispered. "I just wanted honest experiences, and you gave me that." Their notes continued, but the gentle game had changed in light of the truth. Now each new pastry Ansel crafted was tinged with hope that he might win her heart, but also hope that his efforts might rescue the bakery from a looming threat. Maribel, for her part, saw the torment in his eyes and sought to reassure him with sweet lines in her replies. Yet she also had a job to do, an entire magazine's worth of readers anticipating her honest takes. She couldn't just write a puff piece if she didn't believe it. However, the more she indulged in the pastries, the more she felt the undeniable quality of Clover and Crust Simple, heartfelt and brimming with devotion to the craft. Soon the entire town buzzed with the news that Maribel would be departing soon to visit another region. They guessed that her review would be published shortly thereafter, though no one knew exactly what to expect. The bakery's regulars offered supportive smiles to the staff each morning. Ansel's chest tightened whenever he thought of it. Was their budding romance just a fleeting allegiance? Would Maribel's words about him and his pastries take a harsh turn if she believed it was necessary to maintain her journalistic integrity? With only 2 days left before she left town, Ansel decided to craft one final, spectacular pastry to encapsulate everything he wanted to say. He felt that if she chose to move on, at least he would leave an unforgettably sweet memory. He worked through the night, combining layers of puff pastry, each carefully folded to achieve a melt-in-your-mouth flakiness, with a vanilla bean custard that he gently warmed until it thickened to the perfect consistency. Then he caramelized sugar on top, creating an outer shell that would crack beautifully underneath a gentle tap. Instead of typical flavorings, he added a rosewater infusion and dotted the surface with edible gold leaf for a hint of opulence. It was, in essence, a love letter expressed in butter, sugar, and flour. He mustered every ounce of passion he felt for the bakery, for his craft, and, undeniably, for Maribel into this one masterpiece. When morning broke, the pastry sat on the cooling rack, shimmering under the warm light of the overhead lamps. Fatigue weighed on Ansel, but his heart fluttered with anticipation. As if summoned by the aroma, Maribel appeared at the door just as they flipped the sign from closed to open. She accepted his special creation in a delicate box, taking it in her hands as though it were precious treasure. Before she left, she gave him a handwritten note, short and sweet. "Meet me at the cafe by the river tonight at 8." Ansel read it repeatedly, hardly believing she'd invited him out. That evening, stars glimmered on the water's surface as Ansel arrived at the small riverside cafe, an open-air place lit by flickering lanterns. Maribel waited at a table near the edge, the gentle hush of the stream providing a soft lullaby. She smiled when she saw him, gesturing for him to sit. They ordered tea, and for moments neither spoke, content to let the ambient melody of the river fill the silence. Finally, Maribel drew in a deep breath and began. "I'll be leaving tomorrow. I've completed most of my notes for the magazine. But there's something I wanted you to know. Your pastries told me about you in ways I don't think even you realize. They spoke of sincerity, of warmth, of an earnest desire to make people happy." She paused, searching his face. "Your bakery is more than just a shop. It's a home for everyone who walks in. Emboldened, Ansel took her hand, the warmth of her fingers steadying the tremor in his. He confessed how much their daily notes meant to him, how he admired her ability to pinpoint the soul of each place she visited. He expressed that while he feared her verdict on Clover and crusts, he believed in the essence of what they created and wanted to continue learning, come what may. I want to keep baking, he murmured, voice catching in his throat. But more than that, I want to keep writing notes that remind us that sweetness still exists in the world. Maribel's eyes glassed with emotion. She leaned in, lowering her voice. I'm not supposed to tell you, but my piece is going to highlight Clover and crusts as an exceptional find in this region. The pastries are world class, but more importantly, each creation feels personal. Ansel felt the tension in his body evaporate into the evening air. He let out a soft laugh, relief flooding him. She gently squeezed his hand. I keep traveling, but sometimes I wonder if that means I never get the chance to belong anywhere. Then I walk into a bakery like yours, and I realize that belonging isn't about a location. It's about finding a place that resonates with your spirit. She reached into her tote bag and produced a scrap of parchment, placing it gently in front of him. I wrote this last night, after tasting your final creation. Mansell lifted the note, reading it by the lantern light. It was a poem, carefully penned in her smooth, curling script. In a flutter of flower, a story told, of sugar-laced mornings that banish the cold. The simplest of pastries reveals your art, butter and hope. A recipe from the heart. His chest felt tight with emotion. No one had ever described his work with such poetic delicacy. Unable to contain himself, he leaned over and pressed a light kiss to her cheek. She closed her eyes, letting the moment settle between them. In that single breath, they both recognized something tangible and true. A connection sparked by creativity, kindness, and the trust that had grown through bits of paper and sweet flavors. When they parted ways that night, the crisp air felt charged with excitement. A sense of new beginnings fluttered against the backdrop of the quiet moonlight. The next morning, Ansel arrived at the bakery before dawn, as usual. He went about his tasks, kneading and shaping dough, but an unfamiliar well of hope bubbled under the surface of his concentration. Though he hesitated to pry, he knew the day had finally come. Maribel would be leaving. As the first rays of the sun crept over the rooftops, a carriage pulled up to the bakery's door. Suspecting who it was, Ansel brushed the flour from his apron and made his way to the front. There stood Maribel, dressed in traveling clothes, a small trunk by her side. Despite the sorrow lingering in her dark eyes, she mustered a smile. She handed him one final note, placed gingerly on top of the pastry box she was carrying. I have to go, she said gently. But you'll see me again. Then she leaned forward and, with a feather-like grace, pressed her lips to his. It was a brief, sweet kiss that tasted of longing and shared wishes. Before he could find words, she stepped into the carriage. The wheels rattled along the cobblestones, and Ansa stood at the threshold, watching her fade into the bustling street, a swirl of morning light and rising bread-scented air enveloping him. Once the carriage was out of sight, he opened her final note, carefully unfolding it with trembling fingers. Baking nurtures the dreams that hide within us. Wherever the road takes me, I will carry the memory of this place and the sweetness of your heart. Please keep creating. The world needs more of your warmth. Maribel. Tears stung at Ansel's eyes, but they were not tears of grief. It was a strange mixture of hope, gratitude, and a touch of melancholy. He tucked the note safely into his apron's pocket and turned to rejoin the bakery's swirl of morning tasks. The staff was already busy greeting the early customers, offering fresh rolls and steaming cups of coffee. Adrian shot him a knowing glance, patting him on the back with a gentle laugh. Even though Maribel was gone, her lingering presence breathed life into the humble shop. Over the next few weeks, Clover and Crusts found itself inundated with customers from neighboring towns, drawn by Maribel's glowing article. Her words, published far and wide, painted an evocative portrait of a bakery that operated not just to sell pastries, but to fill people with warmth and wonder. She praised Ansel's creations in particular, highlighting the honest simplicity and heartfelt innovation behind his invention. Curiosity soared, and tourists began arriving by the dozen, their chatter merging into a lively hum that gave the bakery a sense of limitless possibility. Ansel worked day and night, his skills growing ever more polished. In the quiet moments, he thought of her, imagining her traveling through distant villages, sampling new delicacies, perhaps scribbling new poems. He wondered if, whatever city she found herself in, she looked forward to the next time they might share a taste of something sweet together. Seasons gently passed. With the extra income, Clover and Chris upgraded some of their equipment, but they never lost sight of their original philosophy that genuine care was the key ingredient. Ansel stayed true to that, putting a piece of himself into every batch of dough, every swirl of frosting. Occasionally, an envelope bearing exotic postage stamps arrived for him, each note brimming with updates on unusual pastries Maribel had sampled in faraway places. She described the spices of a bustling Arabian market, the luscious fruit tarts from a seaside cafe in Italy, the rich chocolate from a Swiss chalet. Yet no matter how world-class her recent finds were, she always mentioned how she missed the cozy atmosphere of Clover and Crusts, and how she missed him. More than once, she hinted that perhaps she would return sooner than most might think. Their written conversation, spanning continents, often drifted into personal reflection. They spoke of aspirations, of family memories, of the comfort they found in small, intimate joys like sipping hot cocoa on a rainy day or listening to a lullaby that reminded them of home. Through these letters, Ansel learned that Maribel was not simply a harsh or guarded critic. She'd inherited her wanderlust from her father, who'd been a merchant sailor, and her appreciation for the culinary arts from her mother, who used to serenade her with songs while teaching her to bake simple cookies. In return, he shared how he felt at peace the moment he smelled the yeast swell in fresh dough, or how every swirl of sugar icing reminded him of the patterns his grandmother used to sew into quilts. These exchanges bound them together, each note a promise that the next chapter of their story was still being written. One late winter afternoon, Ansel was rolling out dough for holiday pastries when Adrian approached and handed him a handwritten letter. Recognizing the flowing script before he even read the return address, Ansel quickly wiped his hands on his apron. Unfolding the letter, he scanned the opening lines, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. "I'll be home for the holidays," it read. "Could you prepare a special pastry for me if I arrive on New Year's Eve?" The note was followed by a mischievous postscript. "I can't wait to see what you'll create this time." A huge grin broke across Ansel's face, and the rest of the staff chuckled, poking fun at how starry-eyed he looked. There was no doubt the future sparkled with possibility. That night, as Ansel locked up, he paused in front of the display case. He ran a calloused hand across its glass surface and pictured Maribel's face when she first bit into one of his pastries. He could still see her subtle smile, hear the scratch of her pen on paper as she scribbled clandestine notes. She was as much a part of the bakery now as the flour that dusted every surface. Their relationship had begun as little more than half-baked hopes, passed back and forth through scrawled messages and sugary confessions, but it had grown into an unspoken promise that bridged the distance between them. Leaning his head against the cool glass, he felt a shiver of excitement for what lay ahead. More pastries, more notes, more chances to love and to be loved in return. And so he locked up the bakery, stepping into the quiet midnight streets. With a gentle click, he pocketed the keys, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply. Under the starlit sky that glittered like granulated sugar, he allowed himself to imagine the moment she'd return and the taste of all that yet was to come.